This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine.
Hi, welcome to another episode of WCM's Park Update, and my name is Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and of course my esteemed colleague Mike Gast, former vice president of Campgrounds of America Incorporated, vice president of communications. And then our guest today is probably somebody you recognize, Mark Koep, CEO and founder of Campground Views. And Mark and I have been seeing a ton of each other at different conferences this year. And I guess that's kind of I wanted to talk a little bit about at the beginning here is, Mark, I guess just give us your opinion about how the conferences went and, you know, what you saw and heard from people, I guess.
Yeah, it was great seeing both of you. Mike, I noticed you're in a sweater now, so
I don't even recognize what I'm wearing anymore. It's all new to me.
Yeah, the biggest news. So, my home is in Wyoming, and as we're filming this right now, there's a blizzard going on outside. So the biggest thing about the trade shows is that, KOA was in Orlando, and then Campground Owners of Expo was in Branson, and neither of those areas were in blizzard. So, I'm up in cold area now, so you have to do that adjustment. But the shows were great, and it was great seeing you there, Ben. And overall, my big takeaway from the in-person events was things are kind of normal now. People were, hanging out, talking, and it re-energized myself and many of the people I've talked to, because it's been a long 2.5 years for a lot of folks, right? Just kind of grinding, everybody's in their own little world. And so to be able to go to these events and interact with everybody on a personal level was a refreshing opportunity for many.
It's got to be sort of a new normal, doesn't it, Mark? We've got a lot of fresh faces in here, and people with probably a lack of campground experience out there getting into the business.
Right on the head. Yeah, there are so many new owners that have bought in the last year and a half, and they kind of did it in a vacuum, right? They were doing it where there weren't these in-person events. And so a lot of new owners, a lot of new builds too, especially at like the Campground Owners Expo. A lot of new builds, people that are, just either thinking about or actively building their properties. And then with KOA, the number of new owners that bought those. And the KOA Expo was massive. I think there were like 130, 140 vendors, just a giant hall of vendors. And, all the owners were in there. So it was just great seeing so many new faces. The biggest thing is that there's excitement for the industry. There's a sense of, I don't want to use the word worry, but just, the unknown, because everybody's seen the macro environment overall, and how does that impact the industry going forward? So that was a big question on a lot of folks' minds. And the answer is nobody knows really. I mean, we know that this last year, when gas prices spiked up, there was a real worry that we'd be in trouble. But overall, in general, the industry did relatively well. Parks that are destination parks that are, drawing people from large distances away, they definitely felt it. But as an industry overall, we're still seeing people camping, traveling, and going out and enjoying some time outdoors.
What's interesting about that is, when I talk to all the vendors, you every once in a while I'd run into a vendor that would be like, well, we're still pretty busy, but we've noticed like future orders are slowing down, like they're not coming in quite as much. But then, all the other ones I spoke about still said they had orders coming in like normal. So that was kind of interesting, because I, trying to gauge, if things are going to slow down eventually. I know a lot of like accommodation manufacturers are still a year out or more on the orders they already have. So I guess, Mark, did you hear anything from other vendors about slowing down in the next year or two, or?
No, I didn't hear anything. I heard from vendors. Being a vendor at a trade show, I mean, if you're not a vendor, you don't understand it. It's like the worst experience ever, because you're behind a table and all of the owners know you're trying to sell to them, so that it's like almost they're being hunted, and so they don't want to make eye contact with you because they're afraid you're going to try to sell them something. So from a vendor's perspective, it's a tough experience at these events. But overall, I think the energy was good. There were a lot of new vendors in the space, and there were a lot of existing vendors. And so overall, the existing vendors have done a really good job over the last few years building relationships with their existing clientele, and from that getting referrals for new ones. And so the biggest shift overall if we look at it from a macro perspective, and obviously we provide marketing services, so we feel it a little bit more, is for the last 12 years, RV parks and campgrounds really haven't had to market themselves. People are just knocking down their door to come in. But beginning this last year and definitely looking ahead, campgrounds and RV parks and outdoor destinations will need to market themselves. And the reality is they don't know how to effectively do it now. And so that's opening the door for, I need to look at my website. I need to look at content. I need to look at those type of things. So through that then comes the ancillary and vendors. So people providing dog park stuff and water and all the different stuff that people can enjoy at parks. Those vendors, it seemed like they were doing quite well with both leads and sales. I know, my barometer of how good a show is how many of the Wilcors of the world sell out their booth at the end of the show, where somebody buys it on and takes it back to their store with them, and saw a lot of that going on. So people actually placing orders on the floor and so forth. So overall, it felt like the mood was good. People are obviously, they're not going crazy. They're being very smart in their purchases. And then for the big purchases, the parks that have cash or have the cash flow to be able to buy things, obviously they're buying things. The question marks for people that need to refinance or finance to do that, interest rates have gone up, and is it now a positive return on their investment or not? That becomes a bigger question for them.
So you mentioned, Mark, the change in the marketing need for campground owners, but what about the way that campers are now, the new type of camper is looking for parks? Is that going to drive a huge change in marketing too?
Oh, absolutely. It's why we developed the technology we did. So the modern the biggest change, I talked about this at the Coney event, the biggest change that happened during COVID is we have a whole bunch of new campers in our industry who never camped before. So they have no perception of what camping was, meaning that they don't have the price, their price floor isn't $30 a night. They don't have a price floor from camping, right? So their perspective and wants for camping going forward are different. They're also, their expectations of the information and the booking process is they're coming from hotels, airlines, Airbnbs. They're expecting that same type of experience on the campground side. And a lot of places really are missing that gap. And so on our end, we believe that the biggest gap is actually visual information. And so that's why we developed the virtual tour technologies that allows people to actually go in and experience those parks. And we know from the data that we're getting is that's the experience people want. They want to be able to see what they're going to get. And so that then creates, and Mike, you know this from the KOA side, that creates that dynamic of managing your grid, because a camper wants to actually pick their site, and then a park owner is like, I don't want you to pick your site. I'm going to put you wherever I need to put you. And so it's creating that type of dynamic where in the end, I believe the customer's right. So if you can provide them the ability to lock sites in or whatnot, that's going to be the winning strategy going forward. So yeah.
Plus, a lot of park owners can build in extra fees for that kind of stuff too, like the lock site fees, where, they can lock in their site, but they're paying a little extra money. So that's not bad either, I think, from the park owner's side of things. But,
well, there was actually just a post in the Facebook group. Somebody had this real world problem. Their park is completely full. They have somebody that booked one site, and within the site's open for 3 weeks, booked one night, and now all of a sudden they got somebody who wants to book it for that 3 week period, and they can't do anything about it, right? It's literally the real world example of the worst case scenario, and they're dealing with it right now. Is how do you deal with it? And so it's an interesting conversation going on in that group about that, right? People are like, well, contact a local park and pay for their night and move them over, and all these strategies where that headache comes up because somebody wanted that one site for one day, and then somebody else wants it for the 3 week period.
So are we seeing more differences coming about between the privately owned parks and the publicly owned parks? Is there getting to be a gulf there?
The biggest, so we've actually spent a lot of time dealing with and communicating with public parks. The public parks are different in that their motivations are obviously different than private park owners, right? So it's all over the place, right? So some public agencies, they actually don't want the guests in their park, right? It just costs them more to deal with the traffic and so forth. But then on the flip side, there are some state agents, really on the state agency side, and some of the city and municipals, they now view this as a profit center. So they're actually investing in their properties and actually raising rates. So you're seeing this now with, especially with state parks, where state parks are now $40-$50 a night for full hookup sites. They're now comparative to the private parks that are around them. That's a good thing for the private parks, because the private parks can maneuver a little bit quickly against the state park and be comparative to price, right? So traditionally, if you think about a public park, it's usually cheaper, right? And the price, you just can't compete with that low price point. All of a sudden now, and I think you're going to see this trend going forward, where my guess would be if the state agencies are going to have budget issues and all of a sudden they're going to ask their public parks to, hey, you guys can't operate negative anymore, you got to be positive. And so those public parks are going to have to do something to increase their revenue. How that plays out, it's going to be a regional thing. It's going to depend upon the state and the overall politics of that area, but it's something for a park operating in that area to be aware of. Pay attention to what those state parks are doing, because when they zig, you can zag. And I also believe that this one goes against some people's opinion. Some folks view the public agencies as direct competitors. I don't. I view them as synergistic providers within the market. So as a camper, I want to stay at a public park, but I also want to stay at a private park. And knowing that we have this wide breadth of opportunities, it's a good thing. The only negative in it all is it definitely impacts the ability of parks to raise rates, because you've always got this public entity that's going to keep that rate floor down.
So as the only one of us three that didn't go to a show this year, I'm assuming that there was a lot of presence there for the e-vehicles and the ERVs and the pedestal people. Is that something that's emerging rapidly now for campground owners?
It's not a big concern for campground owners at all. It's something they're aware of. I know the big national association did a bunch on that, and the feedback I got from folks is the big question was why? Because from an owner's perspective, all an EV is extra utilities in the ground with a box there, right? And how that looks, it's how it looks. So one of the good perspectives I got from one of the owners was, he's on a wait and see mode. So he's got some pedestals set up that are like 50 amp dedicated for EV charging. He's not going to build this big high speed platform for his park, because he's of the opinion that in 3 to 5 years, the needs of electric vehicles will have changed to where what he's providing would be suitable for them. So that's kind of his perspective. Obviously, you've got Mike from Wild Energy with their remote meter reading technology. I saw Mike at all the shows, great technology. And then Utility Supply Group, Jamestown, they're there with their different electric supplies. And obviously they may be screaming at me right now, no, it's the biggest thing ever. And they can scream at me. I'll let them deal with that, and they can come on and attack me afterwards. But overall, from a park owner's perspective, it's not their primary concern. And I think there's practical reasons for that, right? I know there's been talk about electric RVs. You're not going to see, I'll go on. You're not going to see electric RVs in mass coming into your park in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, people may argue with that, but unless the government is going to be providing people with electric RVs, you had a whole bunch of RVs selling the last year. Those things will be on the roads for the next 10, 15, 20 years. You're not going to see a lot of big RVs. You may have Teslas, come in that need to be charged and stuff like that. But most of the parks have the infrastructure to handle that if they're tactical about it.
I think at National RVIC too, the convention, they did, those electric EV panels. I think, their message too was that, just take it slow. I think last year owners were a little bit concerned about it. But I think, you just do what you can right now and then see what the market looks like in your area. I know, like in my area, there's hardly any electric vehicles that you see. So it's hard to imagine that over the next 5 to 10 years, all of a sudden you're going to be seeing electric vehicles everywhere. There's just not the infrastructure yet. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I guess, Mark, back to the state parks thing. I know in West Virginia, they passed a law on a public-private partnership. So now they're allowed to bring in private companies to help operate state parks. Is that something that you think will happen more in different states, I guess?
I would think so. So like Vista Recreation, they operate a number of those type of parks, and we've worked with them. They do an amazing job of creating amenities, increasing rates, and operating those parks at a profit for the state agencies. So from the state agency perspective or the public agency perspective, their job is, they're government agency, right? So this running almost for-profit parks, even though they're on public lands, is not really in their purview. So they don't really have the knowledge to do it. So there is potential benefit for that. On the flip side, you get the argument that they're public lands, it shouldn't be for profit. And those arguments, which, some people may or may not agree with them. So it'll be something, I think you keep seeing it come and go as time goes on. There's definitely an overarching push to make that happen. And some of the bigger organizations in our industry have helped kind of push that idea. RVIA has been doing a lot of lobbying on the public agency side to get improvements within the public parks, because that affects the ability of RVers to go to a national park or whatnot. This last year, I had the opportunity to travel into Yellowstone. And I don't know if you've been there or seen that, but Fishing Bridge RV park in Yellowstone, it used to be just dirt lots and really tight. They have leveled a whole several acres of land in the back and built what would arguably be a beautiful RV resort, concrete roads, concrete pads, pull-throughs, full hookups inside of Yellowstone National Park. And so you see those type of amenities happen in those parks. The problem is there's a whole bunch of full hookup RV parks right around the outside of Yellowstone, and now they're competing with, a private company operating on public land within the national park at that advantage. So it creates, there's not exactly fair operation there, right? It is what it is, but it does create those type of dynamics, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, definitely. We talk a lot about Harvest, Host, Hip Camp, those kind of places. I guess, do you see that continuing to increase as well as more people try to find campsites? Or, I guess, what are you hearing from park owners about their fears about places like that, I guess?
Well, personally, it's like, I won't comment on Hip Camp because, basically they're encouraging illegal campgrounds on private property. Straight up, I believe as an industry, we need to say no on that, because either you play by the rules or you don't. You don't have one way or the other. So that's my opinion on Hip Camp, and I'll stand by that too. With Harvest Host is different. So they're a membership program that encourages people to stay overnight in wineries and at golf courses and whatnot. They're competing with Walmart. They're not competing necessarily with private RV parks, in my opinion. And so Harvest Host has, a large membership base of folks that belong to them. And the founder, Joel, just launched his campers card. So the idea being a discount program for people to stay at campgrounds and RV parks. Joel's an RVer. He owns an RV and travels, so he knows the industry well. So I think Harvest Host has done a good job threading that needle, because it is a free place to camp overnight. That does affect paid parks. So it definitely affects you if there's a winery right next door, right? But it's only one or two campers staying there on a nightly basis versus 50, right, or whatever.
On the camper side, where I watch quite closely on a lot of the websites and the traffic that goes by, there's a lot of discussion about Harvest Host, and there's almost this simmering demand. You talked about threading the needle. There's a simmering demand where they want a little bit more. Can they do this? Can they do that? And can I stay a week? All of a sudden there's this pressure to work outside the lines a little bit. And I think there's a lot of pressure on some of those vendors out there at the wineries and the golf courses to go ahead and let that go. And it's going to be interesting to see how that develops over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And I think, the macro environment is affecting that. I think the big thing, if you remember, the trend over the last 2 years has been the screaming that everything's full. That's gone. Like it's gone. The current macro environment, we don't have an issue with places being full and not being able to find a campground or RV park. There are sites now available in campgrounds and RV parks. We just proved it. We actually camped. We brought a camper on the trip that we went to all these trade shows, and I didn't book anything. I just arrived and we were able to get campgrounds. We went down the Keys. We were all over the place and didn't have any issue getting into campgrounds now. So, that underlying reasoning is gone. But to your point, Harvest Host, one membership fee, you get to stay at all these places overnight. So I could see that being something people push for. I know Harvest Host pushes back against that. They don't want that to happen. They, it's designed as it is, and that's their purpose and goal with it.
Looking ahead to the next couple of years, I know the RV Industry Association just held a meeting yesterday, and we're still pretty optimistic about the RV industry. So, and I think, going to the conferences, people were really optimistic about the campground industry. I guess, what do you think is going to happen over the next few years It's hard to tell because the economy's in a really weird place, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's easy on the RV manufacturing side.
Yeah.
Thor's laying off people at Tiffin, right? So RV sales, what I keep focusing on is the problem for our industry as a whole is that the manufacturers are the big businesses, right? The Thors of the world, the Camping World, they're publicly traded firms. So those will get national attention when they have negative outcomes, right? You'll see on CNBC, RV sales have collapsed. Well, okay. But a whole bunch of people just bought RVs over the last 2 years. They're not selling their RVs. So on the campground side, we're going to be all right. This is a very recession resistant industry. People still need to travel. And even with gas prices high, it's still cheaper than flying, cruising, or other things, right? So it's still the least expensive way to travel and enjoy things. So you'll see our industry wade through that well. The only problem is we have a messaging problem, and we will have this messaging problem from the campground side. And it's important for our state and national association on the campground side to try to wade through that, and even KOA, to wade through that, which is, hey, even though Thor's hurting, we're doing good, and we encourage people to continue to go camping, because the last thing we want is a mental perception on the overall sphere that people are not camping anymore, because you don't want that to happen where that's the mantra. The mantra is, no, we're still camping, we're still moving, we still love it, we're just not buying a brand new RV right now.
That's always been the case. I think that was we always got to pitch camping as kind of recession proof, because it doesn't last long enough to ever have that kind of an impact on folks. And we're the people that have that equipment out there, the 12, 13 million RVers that are out there sitting on that huge investment they made. They're going to use it. They're not going to store it. They're not going to pay to store it. They're not going to leave it beside the house. It's their affordable way to get out, and they've already made the investment. So if you can always skate along with the inventory that's out there, and then when things lighten up again, which they always do, people will flood back into the buying market again.
Exactly.
Well, I think we have to get going. Thanks, Mike, for coming on. You get the audience can check out more about Mike at campgroundviews.com. All the work he's been doing with his virtual.
Mark, not Mike.
Mark. Oh God.
I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting here in Omaha freezing.
Yeah, Mark. You can check out what Mark Koep's been doing at campgroundviews.com and all the neat virtual tours. They just announced one at Launch Point, correct? In California? Yes. Yeah, which is a really neat park. You can see the virtual tour. I think he was showing it off to people at conferences earlier in November. And I hope everyone has a great holiday season. This is our last show of the year, so Mike and I are gonna take a break for the holidays, and Mike needs to get readjusted to the cold.
I gotta go shovel the driveway.
You gotta go shovel the driveway. No, weren't you counting seals in Hawaii, Mike?
I was a week ago. I might as well have dropped in from Mars. That's how it feels.
There aren't seals in Nebraska. So, but anyways, thanks everyone for watching, and thanks, Mark. So have a great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep, bye.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com. Show hosts are Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. Executive producers Rick Kessler and Alex Burkett. Copyright 2022, G&G Media Group.